All right. Okay. Thank you so much. All right. So, first night of Chanukah. So, um, just to give an introduction to Chanukah, we have the pshat level, we have the mystical level, different levels. So, number one, at the time of the Syrian Greeks and the Maccabim, the Syrian Greeks were trying to influence the Jews. And as all times in history, all times, many, many times, there's a assimilation process. And Jews took on many of the customs of the Syrian Greeks. And there was a big power play until until it came to the point where the Syrian Greeks wanted to overthrow the Jewish independence in uh, Yerushalayim, wanted the Jews to put a guard, foreign guard in their temple, and made decrees like made decrees that things that stood for the holiness of the Jewish people. They wanted to separate the Jews from those holy things. So apparently, it all started way, way back when the Jews agreed to translate the Torah into Greek. And when they translated the Torah into Greek, the Greeks were interested and connected to learning Torah, but at a certain point, it was clear that their learning of Torah was such that they wanted it to be an intellectual pursuit, like interesting ideas, interesting philosophies, but not a holy work. Is that Susan in the car? I think so. So hi.
Yes, hi, Bracha. I'm
Hi.
almost
Yeah.
home.
Okay, good. So the Syrians, and there were many, when we think about it, because I also watched a movie, there's some funny, I don't know, movie online called The Old Testament, but it's actually about the story of the Syrian Greeks and the Jews. A lot of mixing and a lot of dilution of the Jewish values. And the Hayom Yom for Friday, actually for Sunday, is the following. Excuse me.
Salud.
Another one.
Salud.
Thank
Bless
you.
you.
That the sins of
Bless you.
Israel in the time of the Greeks were fraternizing with the Greeks, studying their culture, profaning Shabbos and the holy days, eating treif, and failing to observe Jewish tahara. Tahara is laws of family purity, married woman going to the mikveh and such. The punishment and the tribulation was the spiritual destruction of the sanctuary. So in the beginning, they brought an idol in. They didn't necessarily want to burn it down. They only did that once there was battling going on. Death and slavery and exile through teshuvah and Mesirat Nefesh, which is self-sacrifice, came the great, godly, wondrous deliverance, the miracle of Chanukah. So if we talk about the story of Purim, for example, and there's two, it's very interesting because the story of Purim and the story of Chanukah are two holidays that were added on to the 613 mitzvot. Hi, Sarabina, nice to see you. Freilich and Chanukah. Neither Chanukah nor Purim are mentioned in the Torah. And they both come and they both added on to the Torah. In fact, they're part of 7 mitzvot. So if we think of 613 mitzvot and we add on 7 that were prescribed by the rabbis, we get 620, and that's connected to Keter. And it's like another level of, it's an additional adding on to the original 613 from the Torah. But what's interesting to know is Purim was a danger to exterminate us physically, literally to wipe us off, every Jew, right? To be, Haman paid his 500 gold coins to Chashverosh, and the decree was that every man, woman, and child in the Jewish populace would be physically annihilated, real genocide. And because the Jewish people had trust and faith in something higher than natural occurrences, they were able to bring down a salvation and a healing, particularly even Queen Esther, that when she went to speak to Ahasuerus, says she had to walk through the royal chamber of all the idols. And when she went, she felt that in a way she couldn't even pray, that she was in this place of such incredible tuma, such incredible impurity, that she had to reach to something even beyond prayer. She had to reach to a place where, according to rational thinking, there was a decree every one of the Jews would be killed, end of story. But she reaches to this place higher than rationality, which we say is the place of imuna and bitachon, trust and faith. And then the same thing with, and not exactly the same thing, when it comes to Chanukah, we have a similar thing. We have a complete danger to the Jewish people, but in the Chanukah story, it's not a danger of physical annihilation, it's a danger of spiritual annihilation. And again, the messages and the teachings and the process of Chanukah is a reaching beyond the rational facts. The rational facts were that the Maccabees were few in number, and the Syrian Greeks were a huge army that actually received as a gift, I think, 500 elephants. And they had elephants, they were many, they were trained, they were an army. And then in I guess, I don't know what it was called then, Judea, I don't think it was called Palestine, but the Jews around Jerusalem, like always, were a family, and a family trying to hold on to their traditions. And this huge army kind of wants to take over their independence and everything, and start prescribing no Shabbat, no Rosh Chodesh, no Brit Milah, anything that's showing the Jewish connection to something transcendent and mystical and holy. Of course, you can be Jewish, no problem. We're not going to threaten your Judaism, God forbid. But you can't keep Shabbos, and you can't keep Rosh Chodesh, and you can't do Brit Milah, and you can learn Torah, but you shouldn't learn Torah thinking that there's a God in the world, because that's ridiculous. So learn it like a science or a maths, and then we'll have no problem with you. So the Jews are fighting a spiritual battle with Chanukah, and again, this beautiful teaching from Rabbi Dov Pinson, that when they defeat the soldiers and they come to the temple, which the soldiers had desecrated, the Syrian Greeks had desecrated, they could have used impure oil in the menorah. They could have, would have been understandable. In fact, it was even like extra zealous that they were looking for untarnished, completely pure oil. Rav Dov Pinson says that even the fact that they went to look for such oil in the mess, in the debris, and everything being trashed is in a way part of the miracle, because that they would have faith that they would find such oil. And again, when we talk about Chanukah, there's a lot of debate in the Mishnah and the Gemara and whatever. What are we celebrating? Are we celebrating the war, that a few were victorious over the many, which is definitely something to celebrate? Or are we celebrating that this little bit of oil that was enough for one day carried on burning for 8 days, which is a miracle? So there's a lot of back and forth, and apparently in the beginning, they didn't even mention the oil. They just mentioned the war, like if you go back in rabbinical sources. But this idea of the oil is in a way what endures. Actually, they rededicate the temple. They get back into the temple. They defeated the Syrian Greeks. They rededicate the temple, they clean it up, they light the menorah, the oil lasts for 8 days. But really, they don't keep control of the temple for too many years. They keep control only for, I think, 70 years. They have
70, right?
independence
It's the
for
first Gullus.
200 years, but they don't keep the temple for more than 70 years, I think. Or it's not an indefinite amount of time. Somebody said 70, but I'm not sure if that's.
Is it the first Gullus?
So this is uh so there's the first Galus is Egypt,
Egypt, right?
then there's Bavel, then
Hmm.
there's Media, or there's Media, which is Greek, and Bavel, and then Edom. So
Hmm.
those four. But the question is, though, like if you're celebrating Yom Ha'atzmaut, because you've got, Israel is now independent, and you're celebrating Yom Yerushalayim because you're Ki'ilu, because your soldiers have reclaimed Jerusalem, which is modern day holidays. Don't get confused now when I say Yom Yerushalayim, modern day holiday, Yom Ha'atzmaut, modern day holiday. If chas v'shalom, God forbid, God forbid, God forbid, we would lose control of Jerusalem and we would lose independence of Israel, would we still keep those holidays? So when we lost the temple and jurisdiction over the temple, do we still have Chanukah? Because the whole thing is they won the war and we liberated the temple. So the rabbi said, yes, we still have the holiday of Chanukah. Why? Because of the public, the publicizing of the miracle. That at the end of the day, a big part of the holiday, yes, we won the war, and that was the original intent of the holiday, it seems, in halacha. But the light burning for 8 days is sort of the part that is the greatness of the holiday, that even though they lost the temple later on, that fact is still shining for all time, so to speak. And there's interesting things to say about this because it took the Chachamim a year after they came and reclaimed the temple and had the miracle. It took the Chachamim a year to declare this as an official holiday. Why? Why did it take them so long? So this is a very beautiful thing. They wanted to see that the energetic light, the light associated with the holiday, would be present a year later at that time. Would they? And I guess they were sensitive spiritually enough to be able to discern, is there this special light present in the world a year later at that time? In other words, did something happen with that miracle that encoded into the calendar that would be perceivable a year later? And they found that, yes, there was a light perceivable a year later. And then they kind of decreed it as a holiday, and so it is for all time. But it's an interesting holiday because there's even a Psalm 30, I believe, that is talking, that David speaks about, which we say on Chanukah, that David speaks about a house and dedication of a house,
Right.
Psalm 30. And the house hasn't even been built yet. The temple that David's talking about hasn't been built yet when David is writing these Psalms. Remember, David didn't build the temple, his son Shlomo built the temple. So we're talking about, there's also an idea that within ourselves, we build this kind of uh, um, we build this kind of temple within ourselves that we have to dedicate and light up within ourselves. This concept that I was talking before of imuna and of trust and faith, that David is even talking about it as something that's within all of us. So let me try and make that a little clearer to you. So talking about an essay from a teacher called the Nativot Shalom. So there's this Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit, the dedication of the house, right? And David's thinking about it and talking about it. And he refers to some suffering that had preceded in his personal life. And so it says that they named the holiday after the rededication, not after the light. They understood that the function of the light was to provide light after an episode of despair. Hashem had shown them that even in such bleak times, a small flask of purity remains with which to light the future. And Chanukah becomes the time in which a Jew could confidently expect to rebuild his inner house of spirituality. That somehow in David's psalm is this idea of, even if I've suffered, even if I've had difficulty, even if I've been in a dark place, I can rekindle that place within myself of hope and confidence and rebuild something within myself. This psalm, Psalm 30, which we'll all pay more attention to after the class, expresses the certainty that there are no grounds for despair at every moment, even when it seems that we kind of struggling and suffering through. We should not hesitate to call out for help. And so there's that aspect of that. And Mizmor Shir is, in simple meaning, speaks of the dedication of a house, which could be the Beit HaMikdash, but it could also be every Jew whose inner spiritual house can sometimes feel fragile or kind of being threatened. It's a song of triumph for the Jew who has done the necessary repairs and improvements. It can be sung even by one who has longed for the changes, planned and designed them, even if he is not yet being successful in translating them into reality. So there's this idea of hope and trust and belief connected to the story of Chanukah. Now, there's a lot of other things to say about Chanukah. And I think that I want to say a little more before going into the Parsha, because there's some very kind of fundamental ideas that we should focus on during Chanukah. And this idea that I've been saying, that Chanukah was a holiday when they were trying to annihilate us physically, spiritually, not physically. And so in a secha from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he draws attention to the fact that in many other holidays, we have very specific mitzvahs where we do, other than lighting candles, where we're making kiddush, we breaking bread, we eating matzah, we sit down for 3 meals on a Shabbat, on a Yom Tov, we eating, on Purim, for sure we eating. And on Chanukah, what are the mitzvahs of Chanukah? What do we need to do on Chanukah? Anybody know? Like, what do we do on Chanukah?
Light the menorah.
Besides lighting the candles,
We light the candles, we look at the candles, and we sing praise to God.
and we eat greasy stuff.
We're not doing so much. And even looking at the candles is an incredibly spiritual exercise. And why is it so spiritual? What's the spirituality of it? So we know the whole teaching, and I'll just say it quickly because many of you have heard this before, that when God created the world, he put this incredible light into the world, this light of understanding, of connection, of there was this beautiful light permeating the world. And it permeated the world. And then Adam got created, and Adam and Chava were created on Friday, and they were enjoying this light that was revealed in the world. And then right before Shabbos, they sinned, which we know all about, the sin with the fruit of the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then Hashem said, I'm going to let you have 12 hours of Shabbat at night with this light, and 12 hours of Shabbat in the day with this light, and then you have to leave the Garden of Eden. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to withdraw that light till the time when the world can better handle it, better appreciate it, or whatever. So the light was shining for mankind, for humankind, for 36 hours. We call it the Or HaGanuz, the hidden light. So during Chanukah, we have that chance to connect to the light and connect to this Or HaGanuz, this hidden light, which is the light of truth, the light of connection, the light that connects you to the truth of your own soul, the light that connects you to the creator of the universe, the light that connects you to what's up and what's down, what's real and what's false, what's the essence of life, right? That's a lot. That's like, wow, give me that. I want to pay for that. I want to, I want that. So we learn that when all the lights of Hanukkah add up to 36, one on the first day, two on the second day, three on the third day. We're really plugging into that Or HaGanuz. So it's a spiritual holiday, and it's connected really. The Rebbe explains that just like we have a part of Torah that is a more kind of bread and butter kind of Torah, that's the Chumash, the stories, the history, the personas, the body of Torah that's been revealed. But then there's a part of Torah that is more mystical. That's the hidden part of Torah, the mystical part of Torah, the Kabbalistic part of Torah. So the revealed part of Torah, the stories, the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, that's connected in a way to wine and bread. Things that we eat during Yom Tov, things that are sustainable, that form the basis of our diet. But the mystical stuff is like the oil. It's not, you can't have a meal just of oil. You kind of pour oil over on your salad, you add it, you use it for a salad dressing. It's not a thing in of itself, but it makes everything better, and it makes everything kind of more juicy, so to speak. So in a way, the idea of Chanukah, the oil of Chanukah and the light of Chanukah is connected also to the mystical aspect of Torah. So when we're sitting during Chanukah and we're looking at the lights, we also want the opportunity of being connected to Chanukah to be an opportunity to connect within ourselves to this more mystical, elevated, story behind the story kind of time. And so that's why it's not so much about, although we do make latkes and we do serve donuts and we do, get excited about all of those things, the commandment is to sit, light the candles, and try not run around and cook and everything while those candles are lit for the first, it said, we saw in the Hayom Yom 50 minutes. If you can do that. If you can do 30 minutes, then you do that. But to sit with the candles and just kind of be in the being before running to be in the doing, and that surrounded by that light and concentrating on that light and realizing that that light is within us, and that that's the light of creation, and it's being represented by this little candle, but that a purpose in life is to be connected to the light, to seek for the light, to search, to reveal the light, etc., then we can have that opportunity to do that while we're looking at the candles. So that's we're not going to have another class during Chanukah, so that's our Chanukah piece. Any comments or questions about that? I hope that wasn't all completely known and boring and repetitious. And I hope there was something there that you haven't heard before. Okay. So Parshas Mikeitz opens with Joseph's release from prison. And the name Yosef means to increase or add. And in our Torah portion, Joseph's status increased greatly from being a slave in prison to becoming the viceroy of Pharaoh. When Rachel named Yosef, she prayed, "May Hashem add Yosef to me, another son, ben Acher." The word Acher can also mean estranged. So now I'm quoting from Chana Bracha Siegelbaum. This implies that Joseph has the ability, metaphorically, to elevate worldly entities that have become estranged from their divine core. So here's a very important part about who Joseph is, that in the world, and even certain hashkafot, even certain ways of thinking, there could be this idea, and Yehuda was more in this camp, that you have the spiritual world and then you have the physical world. And there are, if we even bring it to a little bit of a mystical contemplation, the people who opposed Chassidut initially, they also learned Kabbalah. It's not that they didn't connect to Kabbalah, but they interpreted it a little differently. And the way they interpreted the idea of creation was that Hashem kind of created an empty space, vacated himself somewhat, whatever that means, we're not going to go into it now, and then managed the world almost from a distance and was a guiding force to the world. And the fact that God could be found in the nitty-gritty of messy human relationships and non-kosher bars and the mud and sweat and kind of, the grobness of life was to them very insulting. They thought, like, God is not in those places. How can he be? That is very, God doesn't get dirty in those, down grubby places. And the Kabbalists that were following the understanding of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid and whatever were saying, you don't understand. The whole idea is God created the world and he's in everything, the nitty, the gritty, the dirty, the whatever. There's no place that's separate from God. So Yosef is the one who can bridge this gap so beautifully. He lives in the mundane world, but he can elevate the worldliness and still keep it connected to godliness. So that's his great accomplishment. So in Yosef, these aspects of worldliness and mundane and divinity are brought close and are revealed as both being manifestations of Hashem. The persona of Yosef may also refer to the soul of the Jewish people. So that's interesting because just like Yaakov, just like Yaakov is like the father of all the Jewish people because he was the father of the 12 tribes, there's a parallel between Yaakov and Yosef. They have similar life stories. Yaakov didn't feel that he could go back to engage with Esav until Yosef was born. They both have they both had dreams. They both were hated by their brothers, but they also both were in a way composite souls that sort of held all of the Jewish people somewhat within themselves. So the persona of Yosef may also refer to the soul of the Jewish people. And the prison in which Yosef was held, listen to this, it's very nice and very deep, corresponds to the body and the material existence as a whole. So just like the soul comes down into a body and it's got to navigate this physical world, Yosef, as a symbol of that, gets thrown into jail and he's thrown into a prison. And there's a parallel between the soul of a person coming into the body and Yosef being thrown into jail. Everybody got that metaphor of the two things being combined. At times, the physical realm confines the infinite power of the soul so that the constraints of material existence can conceal the divine source. So, because Chumash is a story, not only a storybook, but it's a lesson for life, Yosef is a great example of wherever he's thrown, whatever physical constraints he's put in, he connects to source, he connects to, it's Hashkocha Pratis, Hashem is going to be with me wherever I go, whatever I'm doing. And because he's so connected, he can always be, thank God, successful and is enabled to set things in motion that affect for betterment everything and everyone around him. So just to go also on the Pashiot, right, that Yosef has two dreams, that he's going to be superior in a way to his family. They're going to bow down to him. And because of that, they're jealous of him. He gets sold into slavery. He comes into Egypt. He goes through his various travails. He's thrown into jail. Then he interprets the dreams of the baker and the butler, and he's successful in those interpretations of dreams. And as my 8-year-old grandson pointed out at our Shabbos table last Shabbos, Yosef had every reason to sit in jail and feel sorry for himself and be in that, it's not fair. Why am I here? Everyone was so mean to me. My employer betrayed me. I was framed. And he could sit and be in a big huffy fit, having a huffy fit, feeling sorry for himself. But instead, he's paying attention to other people in the jail. He sees the butler not feeling good. He sees the baker not feeling good. He's like, what's the matter? They both tell him they had dreams. He's like, oh, let me see if I can help. And because of his concern and connecting to other people and taking care of them, he then gets his big break, because then in this week's Parsha, Pharaoh has two dreams and can't explain them. And then it comes out that there's this young Jewish lad who's a whiz at dream interpretation, right? So, okay. So, so I just want to read one more paragraph to just keep Yosef's experience in this sort of looking at the spiritual journey of Yosef, because this week's Parsha called Mikeitz, which means it was after the end of 2 years, Kates Sham Lachoshech. He puts an end, a kates, to the darkness. All darkness in the world, both for the general community of Israel and for the individual, come from concealment of light, the concealment of godly light, which you could say the Sitra Achra or the Yetzer Hara. Because if you think about it, God's light is always there, but sometimes we can't see it, it gets concealed. So any suffering is because of this concealment. Hashem determined a certain limited time for the world to be in darkness. As long as we have a Yetzer Hara, as it says, the stones of darkness and the shadow of death. That's a quote from Eov. The aim of the Yetzer Hara is to darken our eyes in order to prevent us from seeing the light of Hashem. This is the meaning of the quote, they have eyes, but they do not see. So as long as Yosef, in whichever experience of suffering or travails that he has, as long as he can always see that God is orchestrating things, he doesn't have to come into that place of darkness. It's like Everyone's trying their hardest to throw him into the most difficult situation. And he keeps saying to himself, this is also, God has a plan. I'm not going to let this get me down. I understand that my dreams are going to unfold and this is all part of a plan that's unfolding. And he never loses connection. That is the key, that just like a cell phone, and I've used this imagery before, when your cell phone gets old, it starts running out of batteries quicker and quicker. Have you noticed this?
Yep.
Right before you upgrade to a new phone, you realize that you basically have to keep your phone plugged in all the time.
They did it on
Yeah,
and
they do it on purpose, exactly.
They haven't changed it.
They do it on purpose.
Yeah.
In a way, when you have one of those phones, and I had such a phone before I upgraded and got an upgrade and didn't even have to pay, I was very excited. But the phone is constantly running out of charge, and you have to constantly be plugging it in and charging and charging and charging. So that's the same as us. We have to constantly plug in to this connection to Havaya, to the source, to godly vision, to godly path, to godly awareness. We got to keep plugging in, otherwise, like the cell phone, we run out of charge. So, so this was the intention of the Greeks. Every time your cell phone is going to plug in and get like a charge of this divine connection on Shabbos. No Shabbos. Oh, okay. Rosh Chodesh, time for renewal. Oh, no Rosh Chodesh. All right. When you get married and you want to sanctify your relationship and take it up to a high level. No mikveh. All right. Okay, so we're going to have babies and we're going to have boys. And of course, we're going to bring them to bris because that's how we sanctify our kids and their mission and their identity. Can't do bris either. So they're cutting off all those places where the cell phone soul can plug in, cut off. Well, the phone's going to die, right? That's what's going to happen. So, so what happens is that the Greeks are trying to darken the eyes of Israel so that they couldn't see the light of Hashem. The only way to break the shell of the Greeks is by igniting the light. That's what we sent here to do, to reveal the godliness. And the way we do it as Jews is really different than any other culture. We don't do it by negating materiality. That's also what Joseph teaches us. We do it by elevating the materiality. We don't not get married. We get married, but we go to mikveh. We don't not have children because we don't want to consume, increase our carbon footprint, God forbid. We have children, but we sanctify the idea of a marriage and family. So we do all of that. We're very involved in the physical world. And so ultimately, just as Joseph rose from the darkness of his prison to become the ruler of Egypt, every Jew is empowered to reveal how infinite divinity permeates finite material existence. Joseph didn't just survive in Egypt. He thrived. He became second in command. He was the boss. He was the person orchestrating things. He was the one who could say, this is what's going to happen. Pharaoh's dreams are indicating 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. He said to Pharaoh, you need to have someone wise who's going to know how to manage all of this. And of course, Pharaoh says, well, it looks like you're a good candidate. What it shows is that the Jewish person doesn't have to be dominated by that materiality. He can actually dominate that materiality. And even in Purim, when our enemies were trying to annihilate us, what we ended up with is not just that we defended ourselves, we ended up actually annihilating them. And we see what's going on in Israel now. Please God, it should continue. And we read this in a prophecy. We even discussed this on Shabbos of Shabbosinah, that one of the prophecies is that we will beat our enemies using their own stuff, like their own oil fields
Weapons?
will burn and consume them. Their own tunnels that they build will end up damaging them. And
Mhm.
we're seeing these things happening. And it's pretty amazing. So I just have one more piece to add to all of this. I'm talking a lot. Are there any comments or questions so far?
You know what struck me when you were saying how the Egyptians were, no, it was the Greeks. Now I forget which one you were talking
Syrian
about, but
Greeks, maybe.
you were saying that they don't want the light, they want the darkness. They don't want the light of Jews to be seen. And I just watched a new documentary about anti-Semitism, which is the best one I've ever seen. A rabbi made it for 1 hour. It's an hour, and mostly he was talking to actually an Arab Muslim Lebanese woman who hated Jews because she was raised to hate them. And then she started to, as an adult, she started thinking about her hatred and questioning things, and then, kind of changed. And after October 7, she's dedicated her whole life to
Countering
combating anti-Semitism.
anti-Semitism.
But they got to this one point where they said, they were talking about Hitler, and they were like, what is it? Why do the Jews hate us? Why do people hate the Jews? Why have they always hated us and hated us? And it's because he said, actually, Hitler understood it. He got it right, that we're good and we have light. And if what they are, what could be more evil than Hitler? He didn't want light. He didn't want good. He wanted control. He wanted despotism. He wanted no religion. He wanted, everything that's dark and killing and blood and violence. And the way one thing you have to do is, I guess, erase the light in the world in order to.
Right. I think he actually said something to the effect that the Jews are the conscience of the
Conscience,
world.
right. Mhm.
And that for some people they don't want to have a
They
conscience.
don't want the
Right,
conscience.
exactly.
So it's interesting. So Chanukah is really apart from the fact, and I didn't really stress this, but I really want to stress it, it's a time of miracles. And when I said that they weren't sure if they were going to proclaim the holiday or not, and then they waited a year to see if that light or that energy would be still present a year later at the time of Hanukkah, and they found that it was. It's kind of interesting to understand how they kind of determined that, feeling the energy in the air or whatever. But it does mean that it is a time of miracles, that this idea that emunah and bitachon, that we pull it down, that when Esther walked through that chamber of idols towards a king, Achashverosh, she felt everything leave her. She felt her prayers were not effective. She felt like God, in a way, had abandoned her. But she reached to something above even her own prayers. She reached to a connection that transcends everything, and she kind of pulled down what's the word? The Yeshua, the salvation. She pulled it down. And when I was reading and studying around this, there was also this idea with Hanukkah that when they were looking for the light and the lighting it's what we do as well in this time is that we pull through our connection to the light, but also our belief and our trust that good is going to come even in times of trouble. We pull down that light of salvation, that it's a two-way street, that on the one hand Hashem will be there for us, but on another hand, the level to which we connect to this trust and faith, even though things rationally look a little stacked against us, we believe that it's going to work out, and then it does. And I mean, we are living in miraculous times. I mean, they literally,
Yeah.
October 7th, they started, they attacked us in the most brutal way.
Mhm.
And look at what's going on now. It's miracles before our eyes. We're taking care
Yes.
of, I mean, God, unfortunately, and all of them should have Aliyahs and Shemaim. We're still losing
Yeah.
soldiers and it should stop. But we've taken care of Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon. We're taking care of Syria has no air force, no
Yep, they
navy,
Nothing.
no
demolished
chemical
Syria.
weapons.
And I know that Israelis were worried about Hezbollah and all their weapons and you know what? They collapsed like dust.
They
I
did.
can't because Israel was
Did
worried
you see
about
what
that.
they're finding? How many weapons and
And
they're
now they're
finding them
ours.
all over the place.
It really is
They're
miraculous.
ours now.
It really is miraculous.
It
It's
is miraculous. And you know
unbelievable.
what? Iran's next, and then they can
Iran will not.
fly
I'm
swat
telling
the
you,
damn Houthis.
once Trump is in, they're not going to. I think
Yes, because
the end
all of this
country.
was done in spite of global resistance to
Yes.
Israel,
So,
Exactly.
including the United
but
States.
we have to acknowledge, and we need to acknowledge that this is because this is Hashem's plan, and He's
Yeah.
enabling us to do these incredible things. Of course, it's Jewish, smart and whatever, but it's Hashem's plan that these are things that were prophesied hundreds of years ago, that the Jews will take care of the enemies. I mean, it is a story that's repeated many times, and it repeated in Chanukah, it repeated with David
It
against
really is.
Goliath. We somehow have this incredible weapon beside us, which is Hashem's Hashgacha,
Hashem.
It
that
has to be
enables us
because
to take
it's
on
been
these
a miracle every
huge
time.
armies, and thank God. So I just want to,
Bracha,
yes,
it's so important to have the eyes to see it. That it's so important to acknowledge it, and not just live day by day and go to work and come back and make dinner and go shopping and fill the car up with gas. The eyes to see the miracles that we're witnessing and how zocha we are, how blessed we are, how amazing it is. Every single day, the news is just out of the teva.
yeah,
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
God,
And we have the trust and we have the faith that in the times of Chanukah, Chanukah is a time of miracles, and I believe we're going to see even more, please God, miracles during Chanukah. And it is very exciting, and it is a schus to be alive at this time. It is
It
a schus to
is.
be alive at this time. So I wanted to do the Dov Pinson, but I'll just really do the summary that he has at the end. He just basically brings the fact that in the dreams of Pharaoh, Pharaoh is kind of passive. The cows are coming and eating the other cows and the ears of corn, but he's passive. And in the Yosef dreams, Yosef is active, and he's an active part of what's going on, and he basically wants to say that we need to actualize our dreams. We need to show trust in Hashem, believe in miracles, and know that the impossible is possible. That as Jews, we have trust, we have faith, but we are proactive. Joseph was proactive. He had the trust, he had the faith, but he was proactive. And it is amazing times that we're living in. It is a very special holiday. It's a holiday of transcendence, right? That's why it's an 8-day holiday. 8 is always the level transcending nature. Nature is a seven-day story, but 8 is a transcending nature. And that, like Susan said, I really like what she said. We should
Yes.
appreciate the miraculous times we're living in, number one. Number two, we should appreciate the miraculousness of our existence generally altogether, that we are Chelek Elokai, we part of God, we integrate, we spiritual beings living in a physical world, but that we created with tremendous capacity when we connect to the root of our soul, which is really transcendent, that through trust and through faith and through positive thinking, we can really open our own eyes and open the eyes of those around us to the reality of life, which is that it's really divine, that God is orchestrating, God is present, God is around, that we part of that miracle of godliness in the world, and that it should encourage us to be hopeful, be optimistic, and be holy as well. So that is my blessing to all of us for Chanukah. And I see divine design.
That was one of those Corona posters I used to make when
Yes,
you talk, and you used to say these words. And
yes, divine design.
and used to say that all the time.
Right. Well, so anyway, so yeah, so tonight's the first night of Hanukkah. We should see the lights. We should be
Amen.
the light. We should see it increasingly illuminate the world. And we should also pray that our enemies should see the light. Like, of course,
Yes.
we want to defeat our enemies. And if they don't see the light, we have to, unfortunately, do away with them if they're trying to kill us.
Yep.
But even better is if they should see the light, like what's happening in Iran now. The people themselves are,
Yeah, carrying
Right.
Israeli
you know,
flags.
Oh,
they,
like Syria.
They
they,
have,
Syria's
the
a little
Iranian
iffy.
people were not, the civilian, did not, never agreed with, the Ayatollah and whomever it
No,
is.
they didn't.
They really didn't. And they, when they were really the sanctions, which I agree they should have, but I mean, Iran was willing to, what was I going to say? Dehydrate like their whole country for not, trading even with Israel, and that people were dying, and they just didn't have any power till now. Thank God for Israel. I mean,
Right.
so all of our enemies should
be annihilated.
their own evil should be eradicated by their own people, and we should
Mhm.
truly see peace in our times with Israel being
Amen.
able to have its rightful place. And that is what Mashiach is, that the
Mhm.
world will say thank you to Israel, and you are
Oh, never.
on. We
They'll
don't
never
have to
say it.
contest
Until
it.
Mashiach comes,
They
then
won't
they
say it.
will.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
The
that's
right
the
will
whole thing
say
of
it.
Mashiach. When Mashiach comes, the whole world will recognize
Listen,
Hashem. Well,
they're
it's not.
saying it in
Who cares?
Iran. They're saying it in Iran. They sing
Exactly. And if
That's
Iran
true.
is saying
That's
it,
true.
Netanyahu. This is incredible. They have
That's
a rap
true.
song praising Netanyahu in Iran.
and then
That's
you still
true.
have these
That
They
stupid
is
named
true.
the
college kids or
street
whatever.
after him.
And meanwhile, people in
Really?
Israel are
I
giving him
think
a
they've
hard
named
time.
the street after him in Iran.
Well, it's not official
That's what
yet
we
because
talk
the
about.
Ayatollahs are still there.
Yeah, so evil should,
It's a
from
popular
its own
street.
self, it should be turned around, and
Amen.
everybody should have a freilich
Yeah.
and happy Hanukkah.
Amen. Thank you,
Amen.
our
Light.
teacher.
Same.
Our
Thank
teacher.
you.
We're so grateful to you, and you should
We
have
are.
Yes, we are.
tremendous abundance in your life and life.
Really, we
Yes.
are. Yeah,
I
I'm
want to
telling you,
actually
make my
invite
night
all of
to have
you.
class.
I
Yeah.
want to, we're having a Hanukkah party on Sunday, so it's not completely public. But if you gals would like to join us, it's for families, it's for husbands, children, whoever wants to come.
I'm
If you want to
coming.
light with us, it can start at 4. If you want to light at home and come later, you can come later. But
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
so you girls better show up.
All right.
Especially
Let's do it. Okay.
Let's
Susan,
do it.
Sandra. I'm going to be there.
Yep. Okay. Steve,
all
we're
right.
going to the
Yeah,
party.
Linda, go to
Thank you.
Okay, if you're having your
I'm
own
gonna go.
Hanukkah party, then of course
We're
you'll
having it
see.
Saturday night. So
Yeah.
anybody who wants to
can't go
come,
Saturday
Linda
night.
can't, but anybody, please, having it
Right.
Saturday night.
If you're having your
Thank
own
you.
party,
Jen.
then you don't have to come, but otherwise, unless you have another party to go to, you should come to mine. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm going to yours.
Susan, you want to
What
come
can
to
we
mine?
bring?
I'd
Yeah.
love kids are going to be here, which is very unusual.
That's
Oh,
okay.
so
I mean,
then-
it's for
Philadelphia,
kids.
but you know what, Sandra? One day I'm going to say yes, and
One day I'm waiting for this. Yes, I'm waiting.
Yeah,
But kids
okay.
can come. It's a